Hello, how are you? In today's video, I will explain to you whether eggs increase cholesterol. Does an egg contain cholesterol in its composition? And will this cholesterol, which is naturally present in eggs, interfere with the cholesterol in your blood? Will it increase or not? Nowadays, there are two very radical and opposing extreme viewpoints. Some people say that you can eat as many eggs as you want freely and it won't impact your cholesterol. Others say that it impacts a lot and you need to control it and be very careful. Who is right? Is it one way or is it the other? Is there a middle ground? Stay with me until the end and I will explain all of this to you right now. First of all, if you're new here, don't waste any more time. Subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell because there are new videos every day and I know you won't want to miss them. Let's start talking a little more about eggs, about this cholesterol issue, which is naturally present in eggs because this really happens. Some people don't know, but the egg is actually a cell, a single cell. That entire egg, which following its normal life would multiply, divide, develop, and become a chick. So it's a very healthy food because within that single cell, we have various vitamins, minerals, antioxidants to form an entire living being to become a chick. So indeed, the egg is a very healthy, very complete food. But as not everything is positive, when we analyze the composition of the egg, we see that the egg white, the transparent part that turns white after we cook it, is basically protein, albumin, and mineral salts. And the egg yolk is very rich in various nutrients, antioxidants, but also very rich in cholesterol. But does the fact that it contains cholesterol harm your body? What is good about cholesterol? Is cholesterol just the villain? Just to be clear, the egg yolk has a large proportion of fat in its composition. A significant amount of this fat is indeed cholesterol. But as I mentioned, it contains antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, and protein. When we remove the egg yolk, we also lose some of the egg's protein content, which is an important thing for you to know as well. But returning to the issue of cholesterol, some people become very concerned about cholesterol and sometimes have the idea that it would be ideal not to have any cholesterol in our body. Some people ask me how to eliminate cholesterol, how to completely reduce cholesterol. This should not happen, and the body doesn't even allow it to happen. I will explain to you how, because cholesterol also plays important roles in our body. It is related to the formation of the cell membrane. Each cell is bounded by a membrane that forms the cell, which isolates the cell, limits the cell, and determines different cells. So, indeed, from the tip of the head to the big toe, all the cells in our body have a bit of cholesterol in their composition. Cholesterol is closely related to the formation of hormones, especially sex hormones. So, especially if you train for muscle mass gain, you need higher testosterone production. If you are a woman of childbearing age, in any case, in general, sex hormones are very important for people. So it's interesting that we have an ideal proportion of cholesterol in our body. We basically have three types of cholesterol: HDL cholesterol, which is high density. I'll explain more about this to you. LDL, which is low density, and VLDL, which is very low density. These acronyms are related to exactly that in English. HDL is high density, LDL is low density, and VLDL is very low density. So HDL is the cholesterol with the highest density, which is in the plasma, and it helps you take some of the cholesterol from the tissues and transport it to the liver to be metabolized. LDL and VLDL, on the other hand, carry the cholesterol produced in the liver to the tissues to be used by our body in the functions I mentioned to you and many others. It's worth highlighting to you that we consume a large portion of cholesterol, nowadays even more. Unfortunately, due to modern diets, we manage to consume a significant amount through food. But in evolutionary terms, since cholesterol is so important for our body had to create a strategy to ensure that we would always have cholesterol, even if it got to the point where you couldn't consume any from your diet. That's why the liver also produces cholesterol. The liver is a major producer, and in most people who have a balanced diet, the majority of the cholesterol in their body comes from their own production in the liver. So in a very simple way, this super complex mechanism can be explained as if it were a seesaw. If you consume a lot of cholesterol, your liver produces less. If you consume more or less, it will produce more or less. If you consume very little, your liver will produce more. And so you maintain a balance to always have that same amount of circulating cholesterol necessary for your body, because you know that excess cholesterol causes some problems for our body, mainly related to cardiovascular diseases, fat deposition in our plasma itself, in the blood vessels, formation of atheroma plaque, which can lead to a heart attack, angina, problems related to stroke. So indeed, excess cholesterol in our body is harmful, which is why there is this more refined adjustment by our liver. But how does the egg fit into this? A standard medium egg has about 190 milligrams of cholesterol, which, to give you an idea if you don't know, is roughly 60% of our daily cholesterol needs if you look at the egg and really consider the cholesterol aspect. However, we already know that what increases the amount of cholesterol produced in our body the most is not the ingested cholesterol, but rather saturated fat and trans fat, which primarily signal in a negative way to increase the endogenous production of cholesterol in your liver. So actually, the cholesterol you ingest is not as related to the cholesterol you produce, but rather these other forms of fat, especially saturated fat and trans fat. This is an important point to mention to you. The second important point is that due to the high amount of cholesterol that eggs have, and this has been known for a long time, for many years, when a person had increased cholesterol, the first recommendation the cardiologist would give was to stop eating eggs. You couldn't eat eggs, you couldn't eat yolks. If you wanted to eat an egg white omelette, you could, but yolks were out of the question. And several studies have been conducted over the years because eggs are a topic that people are very curious about and people really want to research eggs. So several studies have been conducted, and some of them have already concluded that for 70% of people, consuming 1 to 3 eggs per day, I know it seems like a large amount and most people don't even consume that much, but they conducted a study and found that by consuming 1 to 3 eggs per day, about 70% of people will be able to make that fine adjustment I mentioned, like a seesaw, and thus produce less cholesterol in their liver, so cholesterol levels remain normal. Now, there are on average 30% of people who do not have this sensitivity so finely tuned. They are more insensitive to cholesterol. And when a person consumes eggs, 1 to 3 eggs per day, they really cannot decrease production and cholesterol levels increase. Regarding this issue of cholesterol in eggs, there are still 3 things I want to tell you, and one of them is for diabetics, especially type 2. So stay tuned because these are very interesting pieces of information. Going back to what we were talking about regarding eggs, there are things I need to tell you so we can reach a middle ground because these studies are scientific, conducted with special populations with controlled diets over many years, a segment analyzed and statistically evaluated. And when you extrapolate this to your real life at home, it's not the same thing. So have the good sense to analyze your diet. For example, your cholesterol has increased, you eat eggs, and your cholesterol is very high. Does that mean you are sensitive? What about the rest of your diet? Do you eat a lot of fried foods? Do you consume a lot of saturated fats, meat, skin, milk, fat, butter, soybean oil, trans fats from those processed foods, fried foods? Does your diet include these and eggs? Then don't blame the egg for this because the egg might not be the culprit. Another interesting thing, do you exercise? Because we already know that exercising and not smoking help to lower cholesterol. I even have a video talking about how to naturally lower cholesterol. If you want to know more, if you have high cholesterol and are here because of that, you can check out the video there to discover other ways. But let's try to demystify the egg because it always ends up being the villain in this story. Another interesting thing to tell you is that there are people who have a very regulated diet. I know several of my patients from the clinic, this sometimes happens, where the person has a balanced diet, is an athlete, exercises regularly with supervision, doesn't smoke, sleeps well, and their cholesterol is always high because there is also, in relation to cholesterol, as with other diseases in our body, an important genetic factor. There are people who, due to heredity, a family connection that has been passed down, what we call genotype, have difficulty with the liver's sensitivity to ingested cholesterol, so the liver continues to produce a large amount. You might know someone, when I was a child, I had a neighbor who was vegetarian, ate very well, exercised, walked every day, and she had a heart attack. She had very high cholesterol due to a genetic issue, a family issue, and we could clearly see that she was a very healthy person, but really, regarding this cholesterol issue, her body couldn't regulate and measure the amount. And she ended up, without knowing, without doing the test, developing a chronic problem that caused a much more serious issue, which was the heart attack she had. So we have to consider these very important related issues. Regarding diabetics, there was a study conducted where they specifically offered 2 eggs per day, 6 days a week, to participants who were type 2 diabetics, and they evaluated these blood lipid issues in the study. And they found, after 3 months of study, that the amount of circulating lipids in the blood, that is fat, cholesterol, was not significantly altered, even with the consumption of 2 eggs, 6 days a week. Probably on the weekend, the diet was more relaxed, and they were not so strict with the diet and did not necessarily need to consume the egg. But it's worth mentioning to you that the effects on the health of a diabetic will also depend on the rest of their diet. The people who were part of this study consumed little carbohydrate because it is usually the most recommended diet for diabetics, with good sources, whole grains, and measuring the amount of carbohydrate. In addition, the fats provided were healthy fats besides the egg, which is a very important point, and the eggs led to an improvement in risk factors for cardiovascular diseases in type 2 diabetics. As long as, once again, you are not among those 30% who are sensitive, this is regardless of being diabetic. This is a genetic inheritance, a gift you were given which you cannot change, unfortunately. So, whether diabetic or not, if you have a sensitivity to higher cholesterol levels, be careful. And how do you know if you are among those 30%? By getting a blood test. You will need to have follow-ups with your doctor, perhaps maintain a balanced, proper diet, consuming eggs. After about 3 months, you take a blood test to see what the response was, and then you need to be careful if you are someone who likes eggs, wants to consume eggs, if you are diabetic and think that eggs are important. Indeed, eggs help a lot with satiety. The protein lowers the glycemic index. We already have some research indicating that consuming more eggs makes you feel less hungry throughout the day, improves glycemic control. It's all great. But you will need to have guidance, preferably with a nutritionist who can prescribe a diet for you, because eggs also contain protein. So depending on the type of diabetes, whether you are unbalanced or not, this needs to be taken into consideration for your diet. The rest of the fats must be considered, the quality of the rest of the fats, and you should have a checkup at least every 6 months to see how your cholesterol levels are, because for diabetics, it is very important that cholesterol is always controlled. So you must be really wondering now exactly how many eggs you can consume per day, per week. Everyone wants to know how much is too much when it goes beyond that healthy point. In fact, as I always say, it will depend on each person. It will depend on physical activity, the rest of the diet, whether you are more insensitive or more sensitive to this cholesterol issue. And there are also different degrees of sensitivity. Sometimes you are in that 30% group that cannot adjust cholesterol in a more refined way. But with 1 egg, you are fine. With 2, it would already increase. Once again, this is very personal. It depends on many genetic, environmental factors related to physical activity, diet, like everything. When we talk about a person, we talk about a biochemical individuality, which really mine is different from yours, which is different from another person's. So to get an exact answer, you will need to consult a nutritionist, or if you are curious, studious, delve deeper by studying on your own, read articles and test on yourself with the supervision of your doctor, as this is always very important. So it's worth mentioning to you as well that most of these studies were conducted with 1 to 3 eggs per day, and these studies are carried out, as I already mentioned, with a balanced diet. It's a scientific study. So the person really ate 3 eggs per day, unlike most people who sometimes eat 5 because one day they have a breakfast with 5, then go 4 days without eating eggs. Sometimes it works like that. Or there are people who eat an egg with bread every day for breakfast. Once again, the quantity will depend on each person. This is very important, and also the quality of the egg you consume. We already know, indeed, in today's world, that many eggs come from hatcheries, where chickens are raised in confinement. Eating feed, which we know is significantly different and healthier from chickens that are raised free range or those that eat a balanced feed with omega-3 in large numbers, as we are fully aware. These are the best eggs if you can choose. The eggs from chickens that are raised free range or that are offered truly balanced feeds with omega-3 have a much better quality in terms of egg composition. It's always worth remembering too, as I've already mentioned to you, the egg is not just cholesterol. In its composition, there is also a significant amount of protein. So if you have any type of problem related to this, kidney problems, if you have to account for your protein intake, remember not to think only about cholesterol, but also about protein. Lastly, for those of you who are afraid of consuming too many eggs per day, I understand there are many people who really have a family history or even a personal one who are afraid and don't want to take the risk. For instance, one option you might want to consider is to consume perhaps a single whole egg and then add 1 or maybe even 2 egg whites to create delicious scrambled eggs or a tasty omelet. In this manner, you can effectively control the overall amount of cholesterol by limiting it to just a single yolk. Or if you are afraid, have issues with egg consumption, another option is to remove the yolk, give it to someone else, or freeze it for another use. And you add a little extra virgin olive oil, about a teaspoon, and mix it with vegetables, making a really tasty scrambled egg, which actually won't be scrambled eggs, it will just be the egg whites, but you will still get those benefits related to protein, satiety, consistency, and the delicious taste of the egg. But remember that since you remove the egg yolk, you will also lose other interesting nutrients, antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals that are not in the egg white, only in the yolk. So once again, the message I convey to you is the middle path. When we deal with people, with people's health, we must have the good sense to explain that one thing is not an absolute truth for everyone. I've already told you here there is what we call biochemical individuality. What works very well for one person may not work for another, and to assert with complete truthfulness that it won't raise your cholesterol only by doing this blood test and monitoring you in a more personal way. So keep that in mind and don't fall for sensationalism on the middle path we always get there. And now, the part I love, tell me down here in the comments, what is your relationship with cholesterol and egg consumption like? Do you have high cholesterol and consume eggs without problems? Have you had lower cholesterol throughout your life, so consuming eggs is not a problem for you? Do you monitor it with blood tests? Tell me here because I want to know. Like the video because it helps me a lot. And if you're new here, don't waste any more time. I have a lot of cool videos on the channel, so subscribe, activate the bell, videos about diet, nutrition, and tips for your health because that's what I want to help as many people as possible. See you next time. Bye.